So hey guys, and welcome to episode 5 of Weekly Kaiju Reviews. For the last 2 weeks I've been intending to do this figure, but as you guys know, other things have come up, and we ended up having the unbranded Chinese Godzilla and the Pacific Rim Knifehead figure. So today we're looking finally at Heisei Gamera, or Gamera 3. So yeah, this is by Bandai. I'm not quite sure of the actual toy line it's from, but because this came with no tag, and I found a couple of sort of different uses of this sculpt, but I know it's definitely from Bandai. So yeah, let's have a little jump cut and we'll get straight into it. Okay, so starting off with sculpt, as we always do, we'll have a look at Gamera's face here, and the sculpt's pretty good. One thing Gamera doesn't have here that I tend to like individually sculpted teeth, which Gamera here does not have. They're all kind of just part of the face sculpt. They're not separate or anything. They're just all one thing. I suppose he does have these tusks that are sort of individually sculpted to an extent, but yeah, his teeth aren't, which is a shame. But aside from the teeth, the rest of his face is quite nice. You've got the nice brow ridge here and the dorsal sort of spines. A nice, relatively decent face sculpt. If we turn him to the front there, you can just see him from the front. So yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good, fairly standard, I suppose. We'll have a look at his shell next. Yeah, he's got the shell's actually quite nice. It's one of the nicer features of the sculpt here. You've got all these different shaped and different size spines and stuff that sort of form together to make the shell. You've got the bigger ones here, smaller ones, etc. And they're all nicely detailed. They're all nicely sort of etched in. I believe it is all one piece of plastic, the shell, but it gives the effect of having multiple plates all coming together to make one thing, which is really nice. It looks really good. So yeah, the shell's pretty impressive. Moving on to his arms, he's got the wrinkly sort of elephant-like skin that Gamera has, and it's really nice. Again, nothing we haven't seen before, but on other kaiju figures, but it's definitely true to the character, I suppose. Got this little extra horn thing here. Let's look at the inside of his hand now. Quite nicely done, I suppose. He's got, the 6 fingers as he's meant to. So yeah, it's all quite nice. That's the same, obviously, for both arms are more or less identical. If we have a look at his neck now, continues the sort of nice wrinkled skin effect. It is quite good. I say it's nothing we haven't seen before. It is pretty standard for a Gamera, I suppose, but it's nice. Just because something is, something we haven't seen before, doesn't mean it isn't good quality. So yeah, that's the neck. Then if we look at the chest, I mean, this figure is actually slightly damaged. You can see this molding line starting to come apart, but I'm not going to give the whole thing, this production of the figure a bad rap just because mine is slightly broken. But yeah, mine happens to be slightly broken, but I've seen versions where that is intact and it's fine. If we look at the underneath of the shell, it's really nice. It's a slightly different color. It's a bit of a goldy bronze, and it's really good. You've got all these different segments, and again, it's all one bit of vinyl, but it gives the impression of having multiple segments, and it's really, really nice. It gives a nice effect, and I like how it bleeds into the rest of the shield at the edge, the rest of the shell at the edges here. It's really nice. It's one of my favourite things about this figure, actually, is the underneath of the shell. So carrying on with the legs, they're quite similar to the arms in terms of skin texture. It looks like there's a bit of a moulding line at the knee, but I don't think there is. I think that's just to replicate an effect of the suit. Heading on down to his feet. Quite nice. The underneath of his feet are ever so slightly textured. You've got these lines here. We'll just have a look at the information here. Bandai 2006. And then 1999 there. So this is from the 1999 Gamera film, and this figure was produced in 2006. So, but yeah, the legs are really, really nicely done, I suppose. You got this on the back as well, these little extra claw bits. And the tail carries on a little bit with the sculpting of the armor plating, which stops about here. And the rest of the tail is just the sort of wrinkled skin texture. But yeah, it's nice. It's quite simple. The sculpt's quite simple for a Gamera figure, but it's nice. It's in no way bad. I just wanted to point out one thing I don't like about this figure. If you look at the way his arms fit in, if you move the arm articulation, you get these nasty lines there where it's obviously been molded to stay in this position. But I'll talk more about that in a minute when it comes to articulation. So talking about paint job, first of all, you can't really see it on the camera here, but the shell is actually a very dark green. It sort of looks black on the camera here, but it is green. I can assure you it's green. I've seen a resculpt of this, or maybe this is the resculpt, I'm not quite sure. I've seen another version of this figure where the shield, I don't know why I keep saying shield, the shell is very, very bright green. But I'm not sure which is the repaint or whatever, but this one is a very dark green, almost black. If we look at the rest of his skin for the paint job, the rest of his skin is black, maybe a very, very, very dark grey, but it's black as far as I can tell. Very nicely painted, although I can't really tell whether the main bulk of the skin is actually painted or whether that's the colour of the vinyl, but I would hazard a guess of saying maybe it's actually the vinyl. The toenails are painted in this sort of block brown. They're alright, they don't look too bad. The fingernails have that same paint. Then he's got these, obviously the tusks on the backs of his legs and the backs of his arms here are painted to look like distressed bone, and they're really nice. If the camera will focus on such small detail there, yeah, it's really nice. It looks like distressed bone, and I think that's quite a nice feature. And he has the same colour paint on his teeth there, but they're not distressed like the tusks and things are. And then obviously underneath the shell he's got this sort of bronzy gold paint, which fades a little as it reaches the end of the shell, but I think that's more of a deliberate effect than a paint bleed issue. This I would say is paint bleed, but I don't think these edge bits are actually paint bleed. So overall, paint, I'd have to say the same as I said with the sculpting. It's not bad at all. In no sense of the word is this a bad paint job or a bad sculpt. There's just nothing overly, nothing that makes me say wow. They're just kind of, it's a really nice little figure in terms of its sculpt and its paint, but it's nothing particularly spectacular, to be honest. Okay, so articulation is relatively standard. You've got arm articulation here. That will go 360 degrees, but his shell and leg kind of get in the way a bit, and that's the same for both arms. His legs have articulation here at the shell as well, and again will go 360 degrees, but it's a bit awkward because of all the stuff that's in the way. And his tail is articulated here, and is 360 degrees again. Now one thing, I'm not sure whether it's an intentional point of thing, or whether it was just how it was delivered to me, but when this came in the mail, his legs were actually in the shell like that. And if you pull this one out a little bit more, actually, I can show you how far the legs will go in. Just make sure that's out. So take this leg for example, it can go all the way up to there into the shell. Now I have no idea whether that's intentional because he's a tortoise or whatever, or whether that was simply the way it was packaged to make him fit in the box slightly better when it was sent to me, but that's quite clearly where the articulation joints are placed. So it could just probably be the way it was sent to me, and this figure might be slightly damaged. But either way, I quite like it. If it is an unintentional thing, I find it funny that it gave the impression of him being a tortoise, because that's what he is. So the fact his legs kind of retract into his shell is a bit of a novelty, but like I said, I'm not entirely sure whether that's intentional at all, or whether that's just something that happened to this one in the mail. But yeah, it hasn't damaged it or anything. The legs pop back out into place, and they're fine. So articulation, quite decent, nice and smooth. The only thing I would say downside about the articulation is the fact the shell gets in the way, so they can't really go further than that. And just to briefly mention something I said before, if you want his arms down like that, you've got these lines here of non-detailed vinyl where his arms are meant to line up like that. But if you move them is very obvious that that they're not meant to be like that. So yeah, you kind of have to have him posed like that on your shelf, otherwise he looks a little bit wrong with the articulation. So in terms of pricing, this figure seems to be knocking around on eBay for around 20 quid. I can't find it on Amazon, as it is an older figure, but yeah, it's knocking around. There's a couple on eBay at the moment for 20 quid. I paid exactly 20 quid for this with £2 postage. So yeah, that's a decent price. I'd say it's worth that. I mean, a lot of the vinyl figures these days go for sort of that as a minimum. So yeah, it's at the lower end of the spectrum price-wise for vinyls. So yeah, I recommend it. It's definitely not a bad figure. I may have given off the wrong impression in the tone of my voice, but no, I don't dislike this figure at all. I think this is a great figure. It's just nothing. You know, you have good vinyl figures and you have fantastic vinyl figures, and this is a good vinyl figure. You know, it's nothing groundbreaking, but it's certainly not bad. The paint job and the sculpting are very accurate and very good, and they're just not, you know, they're not at the same level as that that Bandai Creations King Caesar. I mean, that was a fantastic figure. This is just, you know, a good figure. This is a good standard figure. So for 20 quid, I highly recommend it in terms of its in terms of the value. So for scaling, this figure is a 6-inch vinyl, and it will fit in very nicely with both your Bandai standards and your Bandai Creations. Just as a scaling comparison here, I'm going to be using the usual figure that I use for comparison, and that is the Bandai Creations Final Wars Godzilla. So if I just look back at the camera a bit, you can see that they do fit in quite well. I've always thought of Godzilla as being taller than Gamera anyway. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe it's because of Gamera's hunched stature. But yeah, I think that's a decent size comparison, and I think it works really well. So yeah, Gamera here is going to fit in very, very nicely with your Bandai Creations and Bandai Standard figures. So he's a nice addition to your collection. So overall, what would I say about this figure? Would I recommend it? Well, yes, I would definitely recommend this figure. It's one of the most readily available Gamera figures online at the moment, especially to UK buyers. It's a great price, 20 quid. That's perfectly decent for a vinyl figure. It's near the lower end of the price spectrum for vinyl figures. And yeah, it's a very readily available figure. You know, you can find it around online quite easily. It's very nicely painted, very, very nicely sculpted, but it's nothing groundbreaking. There are better Gamera figures out there. A lot of the Revoltech Gamera figures look a lot higher quality in terms of their sculpting, but yeah, this certainly isn't a bad figure. I think I'm very happy to have got this, especially for 20 quid. And yeah, I would recommend it to new and veteran buyers, especially if you're a Gamera fan, because you know it's very faithful to the character. So yeah, overall, I highly recommend this figure. And I guess I'll see you guys in the 6th review next week. I'm hoping to do an Ultra Kaiju, as we haven't looked at one of them yet. So stay tuned, and I'll see you guys in episode 5. Like, comment, and subscribe. And I'm going to go have to feed my cat because he's ruining the audio now.